When you hear the word gang, what pops into your head? Probably stuff from movies, right? Or news headlines. But behind all those stereotypes, there's this whole complex social world for, get this, over 850,000 young people in America. So today, we're going to break down what a modern gang actually is, who's joining them, and maybe most importantly, the surprisingly common ways they get out. Let's dive in. I want you to think back for a second. Back to being a teenager. Have you ever done something, maybe something a little, questionable, just to feel like you were part of the group? Of course you have. That pull, that pressure to belong, it is such a powerful force. It drives so much of what we do when we're young. And for some, it's that very first step down a much, much darker road. You know, researchers actually have a name for this. They call it deviancy training. And it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Just imagine a bunch of friends sitting around, and one person jokes about skipping school or trying to steal something. And then everyone else laughs. They egg him on. That laughter, that approval, it acts like a green light. It makes the bad idea seem not so bad, maybe even cool. It's the social glue that can start to turn a regular group of friends into something way more serious. So where is that line exactly? At what point does a group of kids just hanging out, maybe getting into a little trouble, actually become a gang? Let's take a look at how that transformation from friends to felonies really happens. And that's a really important question, right? We all had our cliques in school, but I'm guessing very few of us were actually in gangs. So what's the tipping point? It's not just about breaking rules together. It goes a lot deeper than that. It's about having a specific kind of structure, a specific purpose. Well, according to one of the leading sociologists on this, a guy named Malcolm Klein, it really just boils down to two key things. First, self-recognition. Think of it like a brand. It's the name, the colors, the hand signs, the graffiti. It's the whole identity that shouts to the world, we are a group and we're different from you. And second, a commitment to criminal activity. Now, this doesn't mean they're out committing crimes 24/7, but it does mean that illegal stuff is an essential part of who they are and what they do. It's when you have both of those things, that brand identity and the criminal enterprise, that a clique officially crosses the line and becomes a gang. All right, so now that we've got a working definition, let's dig into the numbers. Because the reality of who is joining gangs today and where they're operating, it might just surprise you. It definitely challenges some of those old stereotypes we all have. So first off, let's just get a sense of the scale we're talking about here. This isn't some small fringe issue. The latest estimates put the number of gang members in the US at over 850,000. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire population of Seattle. This is a massive social phenomenon. So who are these 850,000 people? Well, the ethnic breakdown is complex. About 49% are Hispanic and 35% are African American. But look at this. 9% are white. And that number actually doubles when you look at more rural parts of the country. So yeah, the picture is way more diverse than any single stereotype can capture. Now this next one. This one might actually surprise you. It's one of the biggest changes in what gangs look like today. For decades, we've thought of gangs as a teenage problem, but the data shows that's just not true anymore. The majority of gang members today are legal adults, and a big reason for that is economic. A generation ago, there were low-skilled factory jobs that gave guys an exit ramp out of the life. A lot of those jobs are just gone now, leaving the gang as one of the few viable, if dangerous, options for some. And where are they? I think we all have a picture in our heads, right? The inner city. And yeah, large cities still make up the biggest piece of the pie. But look at the rest of it. More than half of all gang activity in the US now happens in suburbs, in smaller cities, and even in rural counties. This isn't just a big city problem anymore. It's an American problem. The way gangs get their message out has also had this huge evolution. Back in the day, it was all physical, all tangible. It was graffiti, placazos, sprayed on a wall to mark your turf. It was these intricate tattoos that showed a lifelong commitment. And of course, it was hand signs, flashed in an instant to show who you were and to challenge your rivals. But today, man, the game has completely changed. It's all gone digital. Gangs now use social media as, quote, electronic graffiti walls. They're dropping rap videos on YouTube to recruit new members and build their brand. They're on Instagram and Facebook, taunting rivals, showing off money and guns. They have totally adapted for the internet age. Okay, so all of this, the numbers, the locations, the methods, it all leads us to the biggest, most important question of all. Understanding why someone walks down this path in the first place is the real key to understanding the whole phenomenon. I mean, Seriously, think about it. You know the violence is real, you know prison is a constant threat, you know your life is always on the line. With all of that, what is the appeal? Why would anyone choose this? Well, the answer isn't so simple. Criminologists basically say there are three main pathways that lead people in. So the first big theory is that gangs are basically a product of their environment. This is what's known as the social disorganization view. The idea is that in neighborhoods with crushing poverty, where schools are failing and there are just no good jobs, gangs pop up almost naturally. They become this alternative ladder to climb when the normal ladders are all broken. It's a way to get respect, to get status, when society hasn't really offered you any other options. The second pathway, this one looks inward. It's more of a psychological view. It suggests that gangs are like a magnet for kids who are already struggling on a personal level. Maybe they have really low self-esteem or poor impulse control. Maybe they've been through serious trauma or neglect at home. For these kids who feel alienated and alone, the gang offers something incredibly powerful: a ready-made identity and a place to belong. And then there's the third path, which is maybe the most straightforward. It's simply a rational choice. From this angle, joining a gang isn't some desperate act. It's a calculated decision to get your needs met. You need money? The gang is an employment opportunity. You need protection on your block? The gang offers safety in numbers. You're bored and lonely? The gang is a social club, a source of excitement, and for some, the closest thing to family they've ever had. It's seen as a logical move to solve real-world problems. And of course, you can't ignore the cultural pull for some people. This idea of the thug lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that's often glorified in movies and music. And it celebrates this world where power, money, and respect are everything. It's about rejecting the mainstream and living by your own outlaw code, just like Tony Montana. So, we've talked a lot about how people get in, but what about getting out? Is joining a gang really a life sentence? Let's take a look at the reality of actually leaving the life behind. Okay, let's tackle the biggest myth out there, the one we've all heard in the movies: blood in, blood out. The idea that the only way to leave the gang is in a coffin. But the data tells a completely different story. The vast majority of gang members, they actually stay for a year or less. For most, it's a phase in their life, not a life sentence. So why do they leave? Well, a lot of the time, it's for reasons that are incredibly human and personal. This quote here from a former member named Michael just says it all. His biggest fear wasn't getting shot or going to prison. It was having to one day explain his tattoos to his son. It was about the future he wanted to build as a father. And research shows that when people do leave, it usually happens in one of two ways. The first is a sudden, abrupt exit. This usually gets triggered by something shocking and traumatic, like watching a close friend get killed or nearly dying yourself. The other way out, and it's actually more common, is a slow, gradual fade. People just get older. They get a steady job, they fall in love, they have kids. Life just happens. And the gang just doesn't fit into that new life anymore. So we know that leaving isn't just possible, it's actually how the story ends for most members. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. If we know people leave gangs when they find stability, family, safety, and opportunity, then how do we build a world that gives them those things from the very beginning? How do we build a better path so that joining a gang is never the most rational choice a kid can make? That is the real challenge.